in Englisch statt. Ich bitte nochmal alle Teilnehmer bei Möglichkeit die Kameras anschalten, Sound ausmachen, aber es ist so schön, Gesichter zu sehen. Es ist viel lieber als die schwarze Quadrate. Ne? Also bitte nach Möglichkeit die Kameras anlassen und viel Spaß heute.
Yeah, hello, good morning to everybody who is joining us for this energy dialogue this morning. I would like to welcome, first of all, Vladimir Milov from Russia, from Moscow. We are both in Russia, so probably we are geographically not too far away from each other. And even more, I'm curious about what you have to tell us today and what the discussion will be like. Of course, also what our young leaders here from our Young Leaders Seminar together with German-Russian Forum are curious about what they want to tell us. I'd like, first of all, to introduce you to all of our young leaders and to our audience everywhere in the world, in Germany, Russia, maybe also somewhere else. Mr. Vladimir Milov is a Russian politician, energy expert. First of all, in our today's context, he's publicist, economist, and he has been working with the Russian government in the late 1990s and early 2000s. He served as Deputy Minister of Energy of Russia. That was also in the beginning of the 2000s, as an advisor to the Minister of Energy 2001 till 2002, and head of the strategy department at the Federal Energy Commission, the natural monopoly regulator. That was in the late 90s and early 2000s. When he left the government, Vladimir Milov became founder and president of the Institute of Energy Policy, a leading independent Russian energy policy think tank. And I'm especially glad to introduce him as an author of a really very, very well-known report and studies on mismanagement in Russia that he wrote in 2011 together with Boris Nemtsov and other authors that made him certainly well-known all over the world, in Europe and all over the world. That is certainly one of the core pieces of his work. But as I said in the beginning, he is a renowned, internationally acknowledged energy expert, and we already had you, Vladimir, earlier this year in an online seminar, actually, with our colleagues in Washington of the Washington office of Hans Seidel Foundation. That was being hosted by our Moscow and Washington offices. And yeah, I would like to say, let's start immediately, Vladimir, so we get the best out of your thoughts and we get a great basis for the discussion afterwards. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. It's great to be joining you. And I understand that this conversation is focused around Nord Stream 2. Is it a political or economic project? If you don't mind, I'll go back into history for a while, because I used to work in the Russian government regulating Gazprom since 1997. And that was around the same time when actually the first works of the gas pipeline connecting Russia through the Baltic Sea to Germany has begun. Some preliminary studies of feasibility of such project. It had a different name at that point. It was called North European Pipeline, until some point in 2000s when it got the name Nord Stream 1. Now we already have Nord Stream 2. So it's about a quarter of a century since this works began. In a broader context, I think if you look at the picture across different efforts by Gazprom to build new pipeline infrastructure to Europe, it was clear that since the mid-1990s, Gazprom began obsessed with the idea that it needs to build pipelines bypassing its major transit corridor, Ukraine. and some other countries, because we had been developing supplies of gas into Turkey, but we had another transit country, Georgia, and Gazprom also had some problems with it. So it began to explore this big picture of how do we use subsea corridors to build new transit infrastructure to bypass monopolistic transit countries, which created some concern about the monopoly leverage over Gazprom export supplies. Now, there was always a question involved about the economic viability of these efforts. Because obviously, yes, transit monopoly did present some concern, but the question of pessimists on Gazprom's efforts to build all these subsea pipelines was, is it worth it? Is it economically viable? Are the problems with transit countries like so bad that we need to spend so much money to lay all these pipes under the surface of the Black Sea or the Baltic Sea and so on? So here's, if we try to answer a question, is it Nord Stream 2 or Turkish Stream, are these economic or political projects? I think it all comes down to it. What I wasn't able to get during this 25 years was like a straightforward answer that yes, these subsea pipelines are more economically viable than setting some negotiated framework with transit countries like Ukraine, or establishing a consortium to manage and refurbish those existing pipelines and so on. What I heard was mostly politicized rhetoric, including some outright propaganda, which you can often hear from the Russian officials and Russian television, that Ukraine was like stealing the Russian gas that went through transit through Ukrainian gas pipeline system. However, when we come down to that, it's very important to go straight to the facts. And there was never, ever a single case of a one single cubic meter of Russian transit gas stolen by Ukraine while it was transported via Ukrainian gas transit network. So it's important to separate rhetoric from a real economic damage. So in 1990s, when essentially what Gazprom did, it came to us, the Federal Energy Commission, the regulator, with a request to include some money into the tariffs that were imposed on Russian consumers to finance the works related to then North European pipeline, which later became Nord Stream 1. So essentially we asked the question, we said, we cannot do it before you present a clear economic rationale. That North European pipeline, or later Nord Stream 1, I think the same goes to Nord Stream 2 at present, before you present a clear rationale that it's economically more viable to build a costly pipeline through Baltic Sea than to get a better agreement with Ukraine, we won't give you any single penny to finance this pipeline out of the pockets of the Russian gas consumers. But then, you know, it was a different time. Yeltsin was president, and you could have argued with Gazprom if you were in government. Gazprom came to you, and under President Boris Yeltsin, you could have said, if you don't present economic rationale, if you don't convince us regulators, and go away and come back next time when you're better prepared. Now, things have changed dramatically under President Vladimir Putin, because it was clearly demonstrated to us that you just don't argue with Gazprom. Whatever Gazprom says, you just sign, seal, approve, and that is it. So essentially, since the beginning of Vladimir Putin's term, this discussion clearly shifted from a debate between regulators and Gazprom on how viable the pipeline through Baltic Sea is, to just, I mean, shut up and do whatever Gazprom says, because this is a strategically important project. So this discussion about the actual rationality of Baltic Sea gas pipeline quickly faded away. It was substituted on one hand with this talk about strategic importance, on the other hand with a lot of truly politicized and rhetoric with a very little economic component of how bad transit through Ukraine was, so we need to build this pipeline at any cost. Now, actually, in terms of costs, I would tell that many people don't really realize that, because this issue of economic viability is extremely important. Many people don't realize that Gazprom has already spent on Nord Stream 1, Nord Stream 2, Turkish Stream, and all the related connecting new infrastructure which was built on the Russian soil to ensure connection of upstream fields with those pipelines, over 30 billion euros. That's the amount of money which is comparable to anything that we borrowed from the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank in the 1990s. And there was a lot of noise back then that we borrowed too much, there are too strict conditions from the IMF on our economy and so on. Now, Gazprom quietly had spent on all these pipeline bypasses the amount of money which is almost an equivalent to what we borrowed from IMF and the World Bank back in the 1990s. That's a lot of money. And it's quite natural for anyone, because this is financed in a lot of ways out of Russian taxpayers' pocket, out of gas consumers' pocket in Russia. It's pretty natural to ask a question. Was it worth it? What was the big of a deal of a problem with transit countries like Ukraine, so that we had to spend tens of billions of euros on building all this bypassing infrastructure? And actually, I think that the key vulnerability of the proponents of all these bypassing pipelines, including Nord Stream, is that, like, in a quarter of a century, I was never ever able to get like a very short sheet of paper, 2-3 pages, which really compares and explains what was such of a big economic difficulty with, say, Ukrainian transit, for instance, or transit through Belarus and Poland, that we need to build this overly costly pipeline infrastructure through the Baltic Sea. I was never able to get it in 25 years. What I see are like fragments, like fragmented, sporadic arguments, comparisons of transit tariffs between Nord Stream 2 and Ukrainian transit tariffs now and then. However, we need to look in a longer perspective, because like 20 years ago, before we started the gas wars and then the Donbass war, Ukraine provided the cheapest transit tariff for Gazprom ever. It was $1 per 1,000 cubic meters per 100 kilometers. It was the cheapest transit tariff in Europe. It's far more expensive now, but you really have to take into account anything that happened between our countries during this interval. But 20 years ago, it was a totally different setup for a discussion. However, it basically comes down to one question. When you are asking yourself a question whether Nord Stream 2 is economic or political, please ask the proponents of this pipeline to provide you a very short piece of paper which compares all pros and cons and convinces you that Nord Stream is an economically viable project that is worth it. Let's put political rhetoric aside, all this politicized negativity about Ukraine aside. Let's just talk economic arguments in the long term. Was it worth it to spend tens of billions of dollars, of euros, to build this costly infrastructure to bypass Ukraine? What was the extent of risk or economic damage through dependence on Ukrainian transit that actually drove us to spend such a big amount of money? And it's important also to say that essentially this is financed out of pockets of ordinary Russians, because, for instance, if you look at the ongoing perpetual debate between Gazprom and the Russian Ministry of Finance, that's all over the place. I mean, you just take a look at the Vedomosti, Kommersant, and other Russian business media. The biggest argument was about two things. First, Minfin said that Gazprom does not pay enough mineral extraction tax, a tax on the wellhead when gas is produced, pays very little as compared to the oil industry. And second, Minfin wanted to make Gazprom to implement the standard government's rule for all the state-owned companies, that they pay no less than 50% of their net earnings under international financial reporting standards as dividends to their shareholders, which means money to the budget. Now, Gazprom was always refusing both increasing the mineral extraction tax and paying a fair share of dividends, because what was their argument? Their argument was, we need to invest more. And now, where did they invest? The biggest part of Gazprom's capital expenditure program, over 40%, are investments not in upstream gas infrastructure, but in building these big transport networks, Nordstream 2 in the first place, which was the most costly piece of all that capital expenditure program. So let's make it clear. It was financed out of the pocket of the Russian taxpayer, because Gazprom was due to pay far more dividends and taxes to the state budget, but it refused to do so, actually claiming an exemption, claiming a huge discount, because they said, we need to build Nord Stream 2. Let's get to the bottom of it, skipping some intermediary rhetoric. It was largely about building Nord Stream 2. So guys like me finance this pipeline. For what economic reason? We still have to hear good answers about that. I haven't during the past quarter of a century. I hear some mixed politicized rhetoric, but I never saw a small convincing white paper which explained all the benefits of building this coastal infrastructure. So I think, to me, that's the answer. Now, I mean, is it more political, geopolitical, or it comes out of like primal Gazprom's fear of Ukrainian transit monopoly? I'm always against monopolies. I also think that when one country is having a monopoly over transit of Russian gas, that's a bad thing. We need to look for options to diversify, but these options have to be economically viable as compared to what we did, for instance, in early Vladimir Putin's term, together with European Commission. We have made an assessment how much would it cost to jointly upgrade Ukrainian gas transit networks and establish a joint consortium to manage it for the win-win benefit of all the parties. It was not more than 5 billion euros, not 30, but 5 billion euros. So if we only did not shake up all this political environment in relations with Ukraine, did not threaten them with building bypassing networks, if we sat together, establish a consortium, invest 5 billion euros, everybody would be happy by now, and we wouldn't have to spend tens of billions on building alternative infrastructure. We won't shake up the global geopolitics with building these new bypassing pipelines, and like everyone would be happy. That's my perception. This is a snapshot that I still remember from early 2000s when we were all friends, you know, when Putin, Ukrainian President Kuchma, and German Chancellor Schroeder had signed a joint declaration in June 2002 in St. Petersburg about jointly solving this problem of upgrade of Ukrainian gas pipeline infrastructure. At that point, I mean, there seemed to be a clear pattern, a win-win pattern towards mutual resolution of all the risks associated with Ukrainian transit, of refurbishing and modernizing Ukrainian outdated pipeline network, and so on. However, we have chosen a different pattern. We have chosen a pattern of taking tens of billions of euros out of the pocket of Russian taxpayers, spend it on building costly pipeline projects. Economic rationale for it, is it economic or political? I would be convinced that it's totally economic. Again, if I see this paper, which would, putting political arguments aside, which would simply explain to me what are the economic benefits of Nord Stream 2. I have seen none so far, and that is the problem for all the proponents of Nord Stream 2 pipeline. In Germany, you hear a lot of support for this project from the business community, the German companies. Now, the explanation is also pretty simple to me, because Germany doesn't have much natural gas resources. It has to import gas. German energy companies have to import gas from overseas. And Russia is a very feasible and economically viable option. So how do you secure guaranteed access to supplies of gas under decent commercially viable prices from Russia? You get it in a long-term framework agreement with the Russian government, get access to upstream fields, get good contracts with Gazprom and so on. But what if you are being asked that in return for that, for guaranteed access to Russian gas reserves, you would need to support this pipeline back in Europe as a favor in return? So this is how it works. I mean, when German companies are saying that Nord Stream 2 is purely commercial project, of course, for them it is. It's a trade-off. It's a classic commercial trade-off. Russians do you a favor by providing you access to relatively cheap gas, long-term guarantees, access to upstream. In return, they ask you for a favor to go and say something in Germany, that Nord Stream 2 is a purely economic, 100% commercial, and of course not a political project. Why would anyone think that way? So this is when I hear this, when I hear this commentary from the German businesses about the purely economic nature of Nord Stream 2, I mean, it's very easy to explain the background of it. But however, look, it's almost built by now. I think it's a nearly finished project. I think Russians will be able to finish it pretty soon, finish the construction in coming weeks. So I think at this moment, all this discussion makes little sense because it's almost a done deal now. But it makes sense in terms of some future efforts, future projects, future investments. And my major point is that we always need to go back to basics. We always need to look at the clear economic rationale. We need to see who actually pays for all this stuff at the end, because it's not Gazprom, it's us, Russian taxpayers, gas consumers. Gazprom was provided with generous exemptions and benefits to be able to finance this project at our expense. That's not good. I would prefer for these guys to actually make an effort on themselves, to sort of get their political ambitions under control, to sit down with Ukraine at the negotiating table and get a better agreement on how do we ship gas to Europe safely, securely, and cheaply through Ukrainian territory, and actually get it done and make that happen, and not take extra money out of my pocket to finance this big thing, which is not only Nord Stream 2, but the whole spectrum of this new transport infrastructure. Again, this is a factor that is not really, because our media, our television is controlled, you do not hear it every day, that we spend so much money on building all these transit pipelines. Was it worth it? Was it economic? Was it commercial? I am not convinced. Maybe you are. We'll be happy to take questions and participate in discussion on this.
Thank you very much, dear Vladimir. I think, as I promised all of you already before, we have a lot of ground, a great basis for discussion. And Vladimir, I can tell you, there are already many questions that have arrived. So I get right into it. Actually, I wanted to use the right of the moderator to ask the first question, but as there are already at least 8, 9, 10 questions in the chat, I'd like to start directly with those. The first question is, Mr. Milov, could you kindly assess the perspectives of Gazprom economic sustainability prospects as a company in the middle and long term, given the circumstances you have mentioned? So economic sustainability prospects.
Look, I mean, the one thing you have to understand about Gazprom, that it was always, and particularly during the Vladimir Putin era, it was always heavily reliant on various forms of government support. So economically, the model that they are developing, that when they are used most of the super profits towards building a lot of projects which are questionable from the economic point of view. We didn't even touch upon their biggest investment effort in the recent years, the Power of Siberia, Russia-China pipeline, which is clearly a huge investment effort, which is also loss-making. It's pretty clear that right now Gazprom suffers heavy commercial losses from the beginning of delivery of gas to China, because when they announced this project 6.5 years ago, it was widely discussed that the price of gas supplied to China through that contract will be not less than $380 per 1,000 cubic meters. And at the same time, given this price projection, 350, 380, Gazprom was writing official letters to the government saying that we need a full zeroing of taxation, like full tax exemptions for Power of Siberia. If we don't get that, the project will not be profitable under a price of 350, 380 per 1,000 cubic meters. The price for third quarter was $114 per 1,000 cubic meters. So you can guess how many profits they make through that. So they take the profits that they get from exports of gas to Europe and spend this on economically questionable infrastructure that we have been discussing today. Is this model sustainable? Through this, they get leveraged with heavy borrowing as well. This is largely a currency-nominated borrowing, which during the periods of constant depreciation of ruble delivers heavy losses in their accounting. You can see that Gazprom is showing some relatively modest operating losses. They at the same time in their books show heavy losses from financial operations, which is largely depreciation, ruble depreciation of their currency nominated debt. So they become indebted in the process of financing all this economically questionable construction. So is this model sustainable? Of course, no. Will they survive so far economically? Yes, because they get like lots of benefits every now and then, exemption from dividends, extremely low taxation as opposed to oil producing industry in Russia. The difference between gas and oil in terms of taxation is huge. Many other direct and indirect forms of support and bailouts. So if they would be operating in a normal open market environment, they would have been bankrupt some time ago. Not in a situation when they're heavily protected by the Russian government and with taxpayers' money. So the model is not sustainable. A bit broader issue is that they will survive and stay afloat under Vladimir Putin with this sort of heavy government support, exemptions and bailouts that they normally enjoy because of their strategic importance.
Thank you very much, Vladimir. The next question, I get right into it. Which scenarios could there be for Nord Stream 2 under the new US president, in your opinion?
Well, I think it goes back to the question of will Russians be able to finish the construction, the physical construction of the pipeline in the coming weeks and months? And I think, listen, my personal opinion is that yes, they will be. And there is little that America can do to stop it with all the negativity they have for Nord Stream 2. So I think they're almost ready. The vessels are there. The remaining section of the pipeline to be built is very, very short. So it's actually a matter of weeks. And I think what Americans are trying to do is they're trying to use different instruments to impose sanctions on companies that are directly involved in this finishing of Nord Stream 2 construction. But Gazprom also has a plan on how to avoid that and actually physically make that happen. So I think the Biden administration would mostly deal with the pipeline that is already finished. And listen, honestly, this chapter is like almost over when the efforts were made to prevent the construction of Nord Stream 2 for being completed. So I think right now the next big battle, if you will, regarding Nord Stream 2 will be not between Gazprom and American sanctions or the actions of whatever American administration we will have, but between Gazprom and European regulators, because Gazprom will face the same problem as it did with Nord Stream 1, to be precise, with its surface extension, which is called the Opal pipeline, when European Commission demanded that half of it be open to third-party access, as per European Union energy market rules. We will have the same problem here. Once Nord Stream 2 is completed, it will have to comply with European Union third-party access and other regulations. Gazprom will be reluctant to that. It will demand exemptions. There will be a lot of rivalry involved. I think that's the most critical next battle for Nord Stream 2. I don't see American administration as being able to do much to actually prevent this project from being physically completed.
Thanks, Vladimir, for your reply. This is certainly an issue that interests many of my German countrymen, simply because the transatlantic relations are very important for Germany, are very important for the United States, are very important for the European Union in general. So this was certainly a question going into that direction. And of course, also curiosity how you see the perspectives of the new US administration influencing Nord Stream 2 or not. The next question is a bit similar to the first one. At least your reply would probably be similar, but as it is quite interesting, I would like to formulate it anyways and speak it out. Vladimir, assuming the project was not economic, how can you explain that Gazprom and its Western partners are still in the project and started the second one? Do you want to add something to your first reply to the first question?
Well, I think I already answered during my introductory speech. I already answered the question, what's the economic interest for German, Austrian, and Dutch counterparts in the Nord Stream project? Nord Stream 1 or Nord Stream 2, it's basically a very similar picture here. They are interested not in the project itself. They are interested in access to Russian upstream gas, so that gas is delivered to Europe, and these European energy companies will be able to resell it to end users. That is their commercial interest. Now, Gazprom says, okay, I will give you access to Russian gas under good conditions. You will make good profit, but you will have to be part and support of this pipeline through Baltic Sea. German, Austrian, Dutch companies say, yeah, okay, here's the deal. So their primary interest is not the project itself, because it was very visible that at the initial stages of both Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2, there were a lot of questions from European companies on whether they would be participating in this venture at all. Questions disappeared after Gazprom laid out a very clear deal. You want to get access to Russian gas, you have to participate in this pipeline. That was, initially, it was not a given. And they also had, European companies had same questions that I was posing today about the viability of this whole venture. But after Gazprom made it clear that access to Russian gas is conditional on participating in this pipeline, sealing this partnership, which later be sold to Europe as a purely commercial project. You see, German companies are here, so they wouldn't be here if it was not a business-oriented, a profit-making project. So that was the whole setup, right? So because these companies wanted to get access to Russian gas, they would participate in like anything, and that's the point. Plus, very important, and we also come back here to who financed this through taxpayers' money. Gazprom, both in Nord Stream 1 and in Nord Stream 2 case, had set a very, very favorable conditions for companies actually building this pipeline, Nord Stream AG. They gave him a very advantageous elevated investment tariff. So Gazprom pays for the services of this transport company to ship gas to Europe. And those who participate in actually building and operating the pipeline, they get a very good profit from that, because Gazprom pays an expensive tariff to this Nord Stream 2 operating company at the expense of guys like us. Again, if I was the regulator, if I was in the Russian government now, I would question, why do we need to pay extended tariffs on transit of gas through Nord Stream 2? Is it viable? But nobody's questioning them that. So participants of the consortium actually get a very good profit. But this doesn't mean that this whole chain of developments as a whole is commercially viable. There are some centers of profit. Of course, companies who actually build it make good profits. Companies who operate the pipeline make good profits. The rest of Russia makes losses under these schemes. So that's the point. So that's the explanation why German companies consider it economically viable. For them, under a scheme arranged with Gazprom, yes, it is viable. Is it viable for us? That's the big question still open.
Thanks so much. Next question, do you see any other, that means non-economic advantages of building Nord Stream 2?
It's really very hard to speak for me about advantages, in the sense that Vladimir Putin and his ruling clan has been promoting for a couple of decades by now. Because Putin and Gazprom think of advantages or disadvantages in a total 19th century or 1930s, like complete all-out competition, dog-eat-dog competition between nations. This is how they view the world. They don't have a clear understanding of a win-win concept. They have no idea what it is. If you listen to Putin's geopolitical speeches, he says that, look, the world is all out, wide open competition of nations, so we have to sort of grab something if we want it, and this is how it works, right? Now, for me, actually, who emerged as an individual looking at things like collapse of the Berlin Wall in 1989 and building of a fully functioning democratic international rule-based order, which has delivered unprecedented economic growth and prosperity growth in the past 30 years, it's really hard to accept that we need to go back to 19th century or 1930s and total dog-eat-dog competition between everybody in the world. So if you look from the 19th century point of view, yeah, to bypass somebody, get a geopolitical advantage, and see a great rivalry in the camp of developed democratic nations about Nord Stream 2 is a good thing or bad thing, which is clearly weakening the transatlantic democratic unity. If I thought about this in this 19th century modality, I would probably think about Nord Stream 2 as a geopolitical advantage. Now, I don't see things this way. I see that there's a clear win-win pattern for everybody, which also might deliver a lot of economic benefit, very practical economic benefit for Russian taxpayers and Russian consumers, if we all work together and find mutually acceptable solutions under a rule-based order. If we do not try to sort of bite out some competitive advantage now and then in a non-fair competition. I mean, in this regard, what sort of advantage Nord Stream 2 has brought to Russia? It is a toxic project and will always be a toxic project, which will always be a matter of controversy. Even if it's physically built, it will forever be a matter of controversy now. We will have to spend a lot of resources defending it, fighting with European Commission about opening it to third-party access, defending maybe ourselves against some legal claims and so on. You see that, I mean, Gazprom's hostile policy towards European Union and European rules have actually led us. This is one more, it's not directly related, but generally a related question. You've seen how many litigations Gazprom was involved over the past 10 and 15 years. You like wake up every day and read the news that Gazprom have lost some $1 billion in some arbitrage in Netherlands, in Poland, in Sweden, and so on. So we're litigating with anybody defending this aggressive Gazprom's standing, which it is promoting with this heavy-handed geopolitical approach, right? Like, I'm totally against that. I prefer the good old days, even in the early days of Vladimir Putin, in his first term, in the beginning of 2000s, we were still working with anybody, with European Commission, with Ukraine, with others. We were working for mutually acceptable win-win solutions. Nobody tried to geopolitically bypass anybody, and things were good. We had over 12% average annual growth of real incomes in Russia for the Russian citizens. Now, since Putin brought us into this all-out geopolitical standoff with the West, we have 7 continuous years of decline or stagnation of real incomes in Russia. So this, when you're speaking about advantages, I mean, let's look at the bigger picture. What did this ambitious geopolitical rivalry ever given us? I think it has given us more losses than benefits after all. And I think we need to come back to the rule-based order, a win-win approach, sit down with everybody and make compromises, rather than try to bypass somebody as a general mindset.
Thanks for your reply, Vladimir. I just have one more comment of one of our young leaders. There is a different appraisal of the costs of bypassing Ukraine. Krutikin names 80 to 93 billion US dollars. And this young leader, this participant, is quoting Forbes, the Russian edition of Forbes. You talked about 30 billion US dollars. Would you like to comment on that, to add something to these different figures that seem to be around?
Yes, we go back to this question that we actually don't have a one single non-controversial explanation of this whole picture by the Russian government and Gazprom. So what we have is to extract bits and pieces from comparisons by different analysts, different media outlets, and so on. They're not, what I was speaking is purely the costs of building the subsea bypassing infrastructure, which is Turkish Stream plus Nordstream. You might have some analysts incorporate different pipelines, different land corridors, and so on, which is why figures may sound different. But what we need to have is we need Russian government and we need Gazprom to actually come up and present us a complex view, a complex picture, a complex number, a figure of how much did they ever spend on building this transit infrastructure. So, sorry. So while we don't have it, what we have to do is we have to pick up and extract different figures from different articles or reports by different analysts and try to figure out for ourselves. That's not good. That's not good. We need to have a clear explanation from a government, from Russian government and from Gazprom in the first place, with authentic numbers. How much have they spent on these pipelines? How much have they spent on Russian surface land corridors connecting gas fields to entry points to these pipelines and so on? So it's not a question about my figures or Krutikin figures or Forbes figures. It's a question that we don't have an authentic total figure from Gazprom. That is the problem. Do they have something to hide? Why do not they just show us the complex picture? How much did this transit bypassing euphoria actually cost us in terms of dozens of billions of euros?
Clear reply. Thank you, Vladimir. Next question, Mr. Milov, what do you think about the cumulative effect which is being produced by the Nord Stream project on other industries participating in the project, both in Germany and Russia? So we are talking about other industries participating.
It's really very hard to talk about any cumulative effect at all, because what you need for building a pipeline is mostly steel, right? Now, the big question is, do you think that the Russian steel makers would not have sold this steel elsewhere if it was not consumed by the project? So they were sit with all these pipes produced and think, oh, where should we go with it? Steel is not a liquid competitive commodity. We can only sell it to Nord Stream 2. Now, obviously, that's out of question. Nord Stream 2 did not create any cumulative effect for Russian steelmaking industry at all, because if there was no Nord Stream 2 or no Nord Stream 1, steel makers would be able to sell this steel elsewhere. It's a globally competitive commodity which is in high demand. So that's, I mean, so the fact that they came and bought some more steel does not mean that they created some jobs in the steel making industry. No, they would have sold it anyway. Ferrous metals is one of the most competitive sectors of the Russian economy, very much exposed to global exports and so on. So it really, I mean, it's very hard for me to imagine that there was any cumulative effect involved at all. Now, yeah, there were some construction companies who were benefiting from it. I would only refer to the famous publication by Sberbank, Sberbank CIS, after which two prominent analysts were actually fired because they wrote a piece a couple of years ago saying that Gazprom's export-oriented pipelines produce questionable economic effect for the company. They mostly benefit affiliated contractors, which are the major center of profit for Gazprom. And a lot of these contractors, we know that they are personally affiliated with Vladimir Putin, like Arkady Rotenberg, Gennady Timchenko, and others who were heavily involved in building this connecting infrastructure on the Russian soil that connected Western Siberian fields with the Baltic Sea, right? So yeah, they made a good profit. Cumulative effect for the Russian economy, I'm not sure. In construction, for instance, you know what is the official quota for international workforce in the Russian construction industry, including oil and gas construction? 80%. 80%. 80. That is the official quota for construction industry set by the Russian government resolution, including construction of oil and gas pipelines. If you actually go to the working sites, you would see that most of the workforce involved is not of a Russian origin. That's one point. Another point is that the pipes were actually laid subsea in the Baltic Sea, were nearly entirely done by foreign companies. Saipem, Italian company, Swiss company, all seas. Yeah, cumulative benefit for somebody else. I don't know. I have never ever seen a complex spreadsheet provided by the government that, see, we got this and that benefits, cumulative benefits from Nord Stream 2. Steel makers, they would be able to make profit anyway. Construction, mostly international workforce or profits for Rotenberg and Timchenko. Pipeline in the Baltic, profits go mostly to Italy and Switzerland. Now, is that a good cumulative effect? I'm not so sure.
Thanks for your reply, Vladimir. Next question is, after all, sanctions can be introduced not only at the construction stage, which means now, but also afterwards. In your opinion, will Russia be able to use the constructed gas pipeline without any problems? Interesting question. What do you think?
I don't know. Like, we have sanctions have been stepping up as we saw the project emerging, right? So, like 3 years ago, who would have thought that we would see like a complete blockade introduced by American legislation that was adopted December last year, a year from now, right? It's elevating as we speak. Yes, there can be problems, but I just said my personal opinion that I see bigger problems coming from European regulators, because Gazprom will be reluctant to opening Nord Stream 2 to full-scale third package energy regulation. That will be, we saw that already happening with the Opal pipeline, and I think there is a good chance for a repeat with the Nord Stream 2. I see this as a major threat. Might something come out of Americans that might be aimed at sanctioning the pipeline that is already built? Yes, we will have to see. I mean, I prefer not to talk about before we see the proposals. At this point, I think a potential conflict with European regulators is the biggest threat for Gazprom than whatever comes out of America.
Perfect, thank you. I would like to announce we still have a few more minutes for the discussion, for the talk with you, Vladimir, but I would like to announce our next speaker. Our next speaker is Professor Friedbert Pflüger. He's former state secretary in Germany. He is leading the energy talks at the Reichstag, the German parliament, and he is partner and managing partner at Bingmann Pflüger International. So he will afterwards represent a slightly different perspective. We will have him as a guest within 7 or 8 minutes. So the idea was to have first the talk with Vladimir Milov and then the talk with you, Professor Pflüger, whom I already see now in the picture. But I don't know if we still have Vladimir with us. I'm very glad that you joined us also for the first part, Professor Pflüger. And Vladimir, you are of course welcome. There are still also some more questions to you. If you would like to stay here for a couple of more minutes, I would ask you a few more questions, and then maybe you and Professor Pflüger can join in a discussion. That would be my proposal. So we also have a little bit of an interactive element, as I saw in the chat that there might be a wish for that. I hope that's also in your sense. Okay, so I finish with the last questions in the chat, and then I get to both of you. Pipelines built at the end of the 70s were once also very toxic projects and a red flag for the US. Nothing has changed. How else could have USSR and Russian make profit out of its gas production? So in which other way would there have been an alternative?
I think it's no point making a direct comparison, because in the Soviet times, we were in a Cold War with the West, and we were clear adversaries. In the late 90s, when the exploration of the possibility to build the pipeline through the Baltic Sea began, we were not adversaries anymore. So I'm totally against this determinism. Like, this is Russia versus America. Listen, I hate that stuff. I think this is all very wrong that it's gone back this way, that we are comparing the present to the bad old days of the US versus USSR. It's a goddamn shame, sorry, that we came back to that again. Somebody who is guilty for that should be punished, because we should be friends. We should be building a liberal, democratic, rule-based order and a win-win cooperation in trade, investment, opening up borders, and so on. Why ever? It's almost 2021. Why would we ever go back to this Cold War mentality and compare present pipeline conflicts with whatever happened under Reagan, Adenauer, and so on? It's all very bad. I mean, this comparison is very important in just sitting back for a moment and realizing how bad things went under Vladimir Putin and his geopolitical confrontation with the West. We should not have found ourselves in the situation in the first place. We should be all working together in building a common European space, opening up markets, opening up borders, integrating our networks and so on. The fact that we went so far that we are now comparing this to Reagan versus Andropov days, it's just an illustration of how bad the situation is at the moment where we got.
Perfect. Thank you, Vladimir. One more question on academic Chersky, the ship, the pipe layer ship. You sounded quite optimistic about the completion of Nord Stream 2. Well, optimistic, it depends on the point of view, but optimistic about it being finished. What do you think about the technical capability of academic Chersky to fulfill the works?
Well, no, I was not optimistic. I was just trying to make an assessment of, like, in a yes or no mode, whether they will be physically able to finish it or not. And I think they will be. Look, I mean, they will somehow lay the pipes. let me finish. They will somehow lay the pipes. There will also be a question with German regulators and technical certification of the pipeline once it is completed, on how safe it is, how good quality of the work was there. So that it's not, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. It's all very secretive and very hidden. So there is no such thing as an independent assessment of the capability of Chersky to actually, or Fortuna to actually finish this pipeline. We can only guess, right? But I guess that they will try to somehow lay the pipes, because Putin said, just do it, or you get fired or end up in jail, right? So they will finish it. How good a quality it will be, I don't know. I think there will be a lot of debate with European and German regulators about that. And also the depth is not so big. So they will be able to, I think, at these depths, they probably will be able to do it. So I think in the yes or no mode, they will physically get it done. Quality is another question.
Thanks so much. The next question is the last question to you, and I would ask it to both of you, to you, Vladimir, and also to Professor Pflüger, because it is a question that is, in my opinion, a bit tricky, but it's an interesting idea. Dear Vladimir, regarding the protests of especially Eastern European countries against Nord Stream and the so-called win-win approach, do you think it would help to offer Nord Stream shares to those countries?
Now, listen, I have a totally different view on how this issue should be resolved, how all these conflicts around Nord Stream 2 should be resolved. I was present in March 2004, when I still continued to work as an informal advisor to German Gref, the Russian economic minister. I was present at a meeting at Gref's office, where I saw two deputy CEOs of Gazprom, Ananenkov and Komarov, clashing with each other about the whole concept of how Russian gas exports should develop. So Komarov, who was later fired, he briefly headed Stockman project later. He was arguing that we need not build these costly pipelines. Nobody does that. We need to go full LNG, because Yamal Peninsula allows that, and you see this already happening. We need not to bring this gas all the way through costly pipelines. We need to build LNG plants in the Russian north. So that is my concept. With LNG, you can ship gas worldwide, even to Poland and Lithuania, if they want, from Yamal, through LNG carriers, right? So listen, I don't know if how to resolve this conflict between Nord Stream 2 and Eastern European countries. I don't know. This is probably going to be perpetual and hardly solved by offering them many shares. But I think we made a big mistake through betting on this costly pipeline strategy, where we should have entered the global LNG market, where Gazprom is still lagging behind. Gazprom hasn't built a single LNG plant ever. The only one it has taken over from Shell and Japanese companies. And secondly, it has not built an LNG plant. Big strategic mistake. As opposed to these costly pipelines, and LNG would have been a win-win option for everybody, but They have chosen not to go for it. Shortly, that's the answer.
Thank you. What do you think, Professor Pflüger?
Well, I would like to start with what I have to say from a very different angle.
Of course.
To this question concerning the Central and Eastern European countries, I've always taken the position, also when I was an MP and active in politics, we should never do something as Germans above the heads of the Central and Eastern European countries. So there is an old fear in Poland, in the Baltic countries, that Russia and Germany do business over their heads. And that, of course, is something which we have to take very serious in Moscow and in Berlin, and we should act accordingly. So with Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2, we have stirred a lot of disappointment, fears in Central and Eastern Europe, but we have done also our utmost to, ease these fears with building, by the way, with public European and German money, the Baltic pipeline between Norway and Poland, of building LNG terminals in Lithuania and Poland, to build many interconnectors and storage facilities in Central and Eastern Europe in order to make them more resilient to possible Gazprom pressures. My government, the German government, has, and I think quite rightly so, helped to negotiate an agreement between Ukraine and Russia to keep the pipeline via Ukraine. So I think we have done a lot of things which have cost us a lot of money just to give a sort of security premium to the Central and Eastern Europeans. And therefore, I think I take the fears very serious that we have there. But I think that Mrs. Merkel and the European Commission have done everything to diversify the European gas deliveries and also to make sure that this is not above the heads of the Central and Eastern Europeans. But we were not able to convince them. And that remains a problem, and we have to continue to discuss with them and help them to overcome their fears, which are, in my point of view, at the end of the day, not legitimate.
Thank you very much. So that was meant to be the connecting question in a certain way between both of you. Vladimir, I would be glad if you could join us for another while. If you have something else to do, it's obvious. We understand that. We expected you to be here only till now, till a few minutes ago, actually. So I would propose that we give Professor Pflüger the chance to share his principal thoughts on Nord Stream 2 with us. And if you want, please, Vladimir, feel welcome to stay with us.
Thank you,
Professor Pflüger.
Thank you, Jan, and thank you, the German-Russian Forum, for inviting me, and thank you, Vladimir, for your very interesting remarks. Let me say, first of all, I've not been a Russian-German young leader. I was a US-German young leader with Atlantic Brücke, and my whole socialization was Atlantic. So I was brought up in Hanover, studied in Bonn, and for us, the United States was closer than East Germany. So Miami Beach was closer than Mark-Brandenburg. So we were coined, and our whole character was very much formed with the United States and with Western thinking. I've studied in the US, so my background is American. But I have also always understood how important Russia is for peace in Europe. Let me just say, in 1987, I went with the German president, Richard von Weizsäcker. I was his press secretary at that time, to Moscow for the first state visit of a West German president. And well, we, at that time, Gromyko was still the head of state, but Gorbachev was already general secretary. So it was the time of glasnost and perestroika. It was the time of great changes. And at that time, still in the Cold War, I found how important it is that Russia and Germany do learn from history. We were together in Leningrad with Shevardnadze, who was then the foreign minister, at the grave where you have 700,000 Russian young men and young people who were buried during the blockade of Leningrad. And those things should never happen again. That's very basic. From my Western angle, I also have the pillar of never again war and conflict with Russia. And here comes energy into the game. In 1970, Willy Brandt, not my party, I'm a Christian Democrat, not Jan's party, as you know, but nevertheless, I think he was a great chancellor because he understood. Könnt ihr da mal zumachen, bitte? Sorry, I have some noise here. I absolutely understand and well, acknowledge the enormous historic motivation and the deeds of the Brandt government in doing the Moscow Treaty, trying to bring détente in the Cold War, confidence-building measures, peaceful coexistence. And one of the main pillars was energy, the gas for pipes deal. That was inaugurated in 1970, and the Germans built the pipelines, Mannesmann, they built the pipelines, the Russians brought the gas, and together it was a huge peace project. Because if you built a pipeline, you built this for decades. Those who build pipelines do not fight with each other. A pipeline needs to be observed all the time. It needs to be maintained. Someone has to fill gas in it and someone has to buy it. So it creates a lot of contacts between two countries. And therefore, I think these gas and pipes deal helped a lot to overcome the tensions in the Cold War. And while we had our differences with Brezhnev and Chernomyr and all the other leaders in the Politburo, and we had a lot of geopolitical conflicts in Afghanistan and Angola and elsewhere in the world, and it was a dictatorship, it was a communist dictatorship. Nevertheless, it is important to live in this world peacefully next to each other. And here, I think this energy partnership helped a lot. And this energy partnership is living until today. And Nord Stream is a part of it. And therefore, I absolutely believe that there is a big and important political dimension with Nord Stream. It continues this energy partnership, a reliable partnership. So there is this political dimension, no doubt about it. But I would absolutely disagree with Vladimir when he says there is no economic need for it. From our perspective, definitely. What is the situation? We have a gas consumption which is pretty stable in Europe. And most observers and energy experts say it will remain to be stable. 480 billion cubic meters a year consumption of gas, of natural gas. A large part of this came from Britain and from the Netherlands. So it was home production. It was our production within the EU, or at least in Europe. Also Norwegian gas plays a big role in our mix. But the European gas production declines dramatically. In the Netherlands and in Britain, it goes dramatically down. So most observers, I would say almost everyone, says we will have an enormous import gap within the next 10 to 20 years, an import gap. So we need more gas. And now it's not only the Russians who look to the German market. Obviously the United States, Qatar, Algeria, they see this import gap. And the US is absolutely strong, trying to do everything they can do to build one LNG terminal after the others. We have now 36 LNG terminals in the European Union. Ready for fracking gas from the United States, sent over by tankers and come here. So it's not only Russia who believes there is a market, and it makes sense economically to enter this market, to fill this gap. It's obviously even the United States much further away, which believes it's a business case. So to deny that you can sell your gas in Europe, in my point of view, is false. And of course, if I were a Russian, let me say my first article, I have an institute, I had an institute in London at the King's College, European Center for Energy and Resource Security, and we made a study. And in that study, we said, I don't know if you know that for some time, South Stream was a big project of the Russians, sending even more gas to Europe via a big pipeline coming through the Black Sea and then leading to Bulgaria, Romania, until Hungary to Austria. That was a political project. That was projecting power in the Balkans. The economically cheaper version is to just build 2 more strands of Nord Stream 1. That's the shortest way. You save the transit fees via Ukraine. So I can hardly find an argument, and here, Vladimir, I completely disagree. You save just 2.5 billion euro a year transit fees through Ukraine. So it's the fastest way. The technology is there, but it's not. Of course, it's not my task to make the business case for Gazprom. But I was struck by your argument that you basically say it's not a business case. We need the gas. You sell it, and it's one of the few things that Russia really has to offer to the world, and it's oil and gas and raw materials. That's a pity. I wish they would have much more to give to the world, but it is one of the things that we badly need. So from the Russian point of view, I think it is a business case, but even more for us. We need the gas. It is the cheapest possibility for us. LNG is more expensive because it has to travel a long way. It has to be changed twice from gas to a liquid form, and then it has to be regasified after it has arrived in Germany or in Belgium or in France or Spain or wherever. So that is a very costly project. So, well, I would say it makes a lot of sense for everyone who wants cheap energy to get it from via pipeline. Nevertheless, I'm very happy that we have that option with LNG. We have that option because it deprives Gazprom from its monopoly. Gazprom has, without the LNG option, without the option of getting gas also from the United States, Gazprom could more or less, at least in parts of Europe, dictate the prices. With the LNG option, just with the option, Gazprom has to, well, consider if we are asking for too much money for our gas, they might turn to a competitor from Qatar or from even the United States. So from our perspective, it was, and that was always my mission, diversify. Let us get gas from possibilities from the US. Let us trade gas, have reverse flow that you can send and sell the gas wherever in Europe. You can store it, you can resell it. So all those possibilities have been created in the last 10 years. So we have a liquid gas market in Europe today, and but not enough gas. And therefore we need new gas, and therefore we need Nordstream. So it is a political case. Yes, I agree. It makes the energy partnership between Europe and Russia safe for the future. It's also a business case because we need gas and you have to sell gas. So it is a win-win situation. And the only ones who are against it are the Central Europeans and the Americans. The Americans, their main argument is, well, our LNG is not competitive. So many in the Trump administration and their supporters, Ted Cruz, senator from Texas, where we have all this LNG gas, well, they said, well, the only way to bring LNG competitive to Europe is to prevent more gas coming from Russia. So the United States, in my point of view, actually uses energy as a political weapon. They prevent Nord Stream for political reasons, to pave the way for their own LNG. So, again, this LNG is welcome, but we are happy to have the best prices for our gas, because that means that our products, chemical industry and machines and aluminum and steel are competitive everywhere. Automotives are competitive, and therefore we need cheap energy prices. And therefore, I must say, well, we cannot rely on LNG alone, but we want to continue to get our gas from Norway and Russia. So a business case for us, I think also for you, but that is at the end of the day a question that the Russian authorities and Russian companies and the Russian people have to discuss. That's not my task to do that. From our interest, it is a clear business model, and therefore OMV, Austria, Uniper in Germany, and in France, Shell, they are all partners of that project. They are all investors, and they are not investing because they want to lose money. They have their shareholders, and these shareholders are not embarking on geopolitical dreams and thoughts. They want to have their money back. And therefore, it is clear next to the political dimension that it is also a very important business model that we have here. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Professor Pflüger. I'm very glad that after your connecting thoughts in the beginning, you also at a certain point disagreed with Vladimir Milov, because that is a little bit the essence of our today's discussion, that we have different points of view. I think we had now a very, very interesting perspective from Germany, a German point of view. The discussion, I personally, of course, follow the discussion in both countries, but I think you summed up quite well the point of view of German business, of the German business community, and in the end also what German politics is standing for in this question. I would like to start right into the questions, because we already have the first questions also for you. The United States is Germany's most important trading partner. Russia, according to statistics, is only in the 14th place. In your opinion, isn't it easier for Germany to buy gas from the US and save itself from political confrontation with the US? Well, you already pointed it out in your thoughts you shared with us, but maybe you want to elaborate a little bit more on that, if you want.
Absolutely. Well, the US has always been very skeptical and even completely against these gas deals between Russia and Germany. So, well, this Willy Brandt project in 1970, later continued by Helmut Schmidt and Helmut Kohl, was always something Washington did not like. But Washington always respected that Germany is an ally and has its own interests. And well, we were always able to find solutions and compromises. And in the last years, sanctions have, in a way, in my point of view, substituted foreign policy and diplomacy. And it is absolutely unacceptable for Germany that the United States of America dictates our energy policy in Europe. That we do ourselves. And threatening sanctions against European companies. Vladimir mentioned the company All Seas, which provided the investors and Gazprom with laying the pipelines through the Baltic Sea, was asked to, it was demanded that they immediately stop doing that business, otherwise they would lose their all their businesses in the United States and elsewhere, because most of the world trade is done with the dollars. So this is an enormous threat to European companies, and that is absolutely unacceptable among partners. Again, the US has its right to say, well, we don't like that project. We have other ideas, but in the moment we start with extraterritorial sanctions against each other, then we feel that we are not partners, but that we are a sort of colony to the United States. And the ambassador who served here from the United States, really, he behaved here as if he had to dictate what we do. And that is something where we're very sensitive and what we really do not like. So you can criticize Nord Stream, and for instance, the Green Party in Germany is against Nord Stream. It's the only party who is against Nord Stream, but they are also violently against the United States sanctioning us. And so there's a unanimous front in the German Bundestag against the US attempts to sanction German and European companies who are working with Nord Stream.
Thank you very much for your reply, thoughtful reply. we are getting to the next question, which reminds me a bit, we had last night for our young leaders the opening session. There was also Matthias Platzek, president of Deutsch-Russisches Forum, of German-Russian Forum. And he said that many German politicians and German officials, also business people, had more this transatlantic background, this German-American or American-German background, and not that German-Russian background. Well, I'm also one of those guys. I spent a year in the United States, studied there. It was a regular exchange program of my university. But as you can see, I finished in one of the most fascinating, I would say, beautiful and also dynamic cities of the world, in Moscow. And I would really argue that this flexibility is the big asset of today's generation, of today's young generation in particular. And Mr. Platzek yesterday said, unfortunately, there is so little experience of young deputies, of young members of parliament with Russia and Eastern Europe. But I think today, nowadays, things, and I hope nowadays things are changing. Indeed, also in both conservative parties in Germany, I think we could wish for a little bit more expertise on Russia, on energy issues in general. Of course, we have many experienced parliamentarians there, but I hope that this wish that Mr. Platzek formulated yesterday will be put into practice, and a little bit in the same direction, even if not directly or not at all actually referred to the transatlantic partnership. Mr. Pflüger, from your point of view, will we still be able to speak about the positive interdependence between Germany with its natural and machinery and equipment, this way around, and Russia with its natural resources in the future? So really, now the kind of questions on the Russian-German relationship itself are getting in. I'm glad about that. Would you like to speak on that a bit?
Absolutely. The interdependence is obvious. We don't have natural resources. Russia has them. We have a lot of manufacturing abilities and well, one of the strongest exporters globally. So the interdependence has characterized the German-Russian relationship since the 70s. Despite all the difficulties we had politically, it was clear that both sides had a win-win situation. And this interdependence, as I said before, stabilized the relationship during the Cold War. And referring to what Jan just said, about Moscow and Russia. I know there's a lot politically that you can question. The Navalny case, for instance, terrible thing. You can make a lot of criticism to the political system. But if you compare it with the communist regime, I mean, it is an absolute progress that we see, and people can travel freely. And especially in the big cities like Moscow and Leningrad, you live freely and you have different papers. And at that time, well, not to speak about Stalin and the archipel Gulag, but also in the time in the 60s and 70s, it was a real dictatorship. And now it is not a Westminster democracy, but it's much better than it used to be before the wall came down and we had the European Revolution in 89, 90. So, well, criticism is absolutely necessary, but countries have to live next with each other, even if they have a different approach to democracy, to pluralism, if they have different opinions how to treat their citizens and so on, we nevertheless need peace. Again, Willy Brandt, sorry that I quote him again, he said, well, peace is not everything, but without peace, everything is nothing. And we have to, our generation, I mean, you're much younger, but we have all lived in peace. We have no idea how terrible war is. Well, we have 80 years now since, almost 80 years since the war in Europe came to an end. And we think sometimes that is, well, self-assured. That's life. No, it's not. It is the absolute exception in European history. Such a long period of peace, and we should do our utmost to keep it. So with all the criticism I have politically, I would say, well, let's keep our good contacts. And I think in this sense, Jan and myself, been educated in the West, being citizens of Western democracy, feel that it's absolutely important to have good relations with Russia.
Thank you very much for your words. You see that the sun is moving here in my working room, in my cabinet. And when you talk about peace and about these important thoughts, when you share them with us, the summer's coming. So don't worry if I need to escape every once in a while, so it doesn't get too bright, and it's not going to blend me. Next question. Herr Professor Pflüger, according to the EU regulation, it is no longer possible for Gazprom to dictate the gas price. How correctly is it to describe Gazprom as a monopolist under these circumstances, I guess?
It's, in my point of view, it's a false assessment.
Yeah.
Gazprom in parts of Europe could dictate prices. It was a monopolist. And we could feel that after the Russian-Ukrainian gas crisis in 2006 and 2009, that in some parts of Europe, Gazprom just could, well, turn the switch and they had no gas in the winter. So it had an enormously powerful position. But with the EU's policies, since then, in the last decade, this monopoly position of Gazprom has changed with these 36 LNG terminals, with reverse flow, that you can send gas in all directions, that you can resell it, with storage facilities, with interconnectors. There is no monopoly anymore. And should Gazprom or the Kremlin should say, well, you're politically not behaving as we want, so we don't send our gas anymore to you. If they would use gas as a tool to blackmail, they have no chance, because we can diversify. We get gas from the Caspian via the Trans-Adriatic pipeline. We could get gas from the United States. It would cost more, but it is there, and we could buy it. Also from Algeria, Qatar, and even from Africa. So we are diversified and have the luxury now to look for the best possibilities, and Gazprom is no more a monopolist. By the way, there's a lot of Russian competition, Novatek, with LNG. It was mentioned before, coming from the Yamal island to Europe. So even within Russia, there is, well, at least a form of competition between Novatek and Gazprom.
Thank you very much. The next question is also an important one, an interesting one about the energy mix. Professor Pflüger, you mentioned diversification in the energy mix. How do you see the development of the renewable or alternative energies in Germany and Europe? What do you think?
Well, if you look to it globally, and definitely in Europe, renewable energy is growing stronger than every other form of energy. So it is a huge victory for the renewables that we witnessed in the last 10 to 15 years. And in my point of view, natural gas, the future of natural gas is limited. And therefore, it is important that also Russia diversifies, and it does. A lot of wind, you have biomass, you have nuclear, you have the possibility to produce hydrogen. And we are all embarking on a hydrogen society. So you can win this hydrogen from renewables, but also with pyrolysis, for instance, from natural gas. So Gazprom has understood, finally, one can say, that it also has to embark on a strategy of producing hydrogen and ship hydrogen to the world in order to make its business model safe for the long-term future. So renewables are winning because sun and wind is there in the world. It is the cheapest at the end of the day. I think we are all, and also Russia, should look not to lose the future by neglecting the importance of renewables.
Thank you very much for your reply. The next question, I need to look for it for a second. Professor Pflüger, do you think there is a chance for Europe as a whole with regards to the new Biden administration to follow their own economic and energy agenda? Well, it's a similar question and also connected to your reply before. Or will the US-American course of threats and sanctions continue in the next few years? Well, maybe a little bit more projected to the future. So maybe you want to reply to that question as well.
Well, I absolutely believe that these Trump years were very dangerous for the transatlantic relationship because he was a nationalist. America first. He didn't care about the interests of the allies and partners. So that will change under Biden. Biden is not necessarily a great friend of Russia. He's skeptical towards Putin. He's skeptical towards Nordstream, no doubt about that. But I doubt that he will treat the European allies as Mr. Trump has done. So he will take the arguments coming from Europe, which are in the way Jan and myself have been arguing today, not anti-Western, not anti-American, quite the contrary, but which take into consideration that, well, there are other ideas and other interests and other perspectives. So he will listen, and his people around him are pretty smart people with Western and European roots. Well, I believe while he will not completely change his views on Russia and on Nord Stream, he will listen and he will stop at least sanctioning European companies. Well, that's my hope, but I also think that there is some evidence for that.
Thank you very much. Next question goes into a similar direction, but it's still very interesting because it brings up a new idea, an idea we haven't been discussing yet so far. Professor Pflüger, in your opinion, could a large international conference and the conclusion of an international agreement like a convention on Nord Stream 2 ensure the successful development of this project and protect it from possible sanctions or problems in further implementation? Or can international law not help in this situation?
Well, international law can help, and Nord Stream has been built under international law. It fulfills all the requirements. It has all the permissions. So there is no need for additional conferences. It is a question of the partners who have been active and who have gotten all the necessary permissions under international law, and we should just execute international law here and not put ourselves into a position as if we do something bad with Nord Stream. It was a democratic decision. All the Danes and the Finns and all the Baltic countries have agreed on it. So no need for further international conferences.
Thank you very much. The next question is quite a critical one from a Russian perspective. Professor Pflüger, you should try to test the life of a Russian citizen under Putin's rule, keeping in mind your comparison probably that Putin's regime is better than Stalin's. And then the thought goes on, just a second. I would agree, thinking of my friends in Russia, that's a different participant. We cannot do just business as usual with an ever more authoritarian government, because as democracies, we are the only allies that the Russian people have. US or China won't engage for better human rights in Russia. Well, probably difficult, yeah. What do you think? Would you like to comment on this question?
Of course, and I think it is the good right of you and of anybody to say, well, we want more democracy, we want to live freer, we want to have more human rights, well, there's a lot of sympathy that you find with those demands in the United States, but also in Europe and in Germany. But we cannot make this the precondition for having good relations with Russia. Because, again, also peace and stability and is a moral category. And, well, I stick to my comparison. If you compare Putin, as much as you might criticize him, with the regimes before, the communist regimes, it has been absolutely terrible what happened under Stalin and under communist dictatorship. And well, I understand that you today say, well, those comparisons do not help very much. But also, my question to you is, what comes after Putin? If he's not there, do you think we will have a Westminster democracy then in Russia? Will it be better necessarily? I have a lot of fears that it might be worse afterwards. Again, those are not the questions that we have to decide. But do not underestimate the importance of stability, of peace. If you look to many other countries in the world that do not have that stability, that have civil wars, that have fundamentalist oppositions, terror and bombings, well, you might get a feeling how much worth it is stability also in internal relations. But again, I'm not arguing for or against Putin. I can understand that there is a lot of criticism which is shared here. I only want to say I want to have a good relationship with Russia, whoever is governing in the Kremlin. We have to have some peaceful coexistence with that partner.
Thank you very much. Indeed, there is another comment going in a different direction than the one before. I'm a Russian citizen, and I would find it interesting in which way our life under the so-called Putin regime is so bad. So there are also other opinions within our audience. Like we try to have a balanced panel, we are also having quite balanced young leaders. The next question, we are getting towards the end, but there are another one or two questions I'd like to ask you. Dear Professor Pflüger, you mentioned that Berlin missed to convince Eastern European countries on Nord Stream. It's the question from the beginning when the switch was between Vladimir and you. But how about the political majority in Germany? More and more politicians, for example, Green Party, you already mentioned it, Professor Pflüger, request the German government to stop Nord Stream 2. On the other hand, there is little protection against UN sanctions to companies involved in the project. Does the German government is in favor, or is the German government tending to allow US interventions to stop Nord Stream 2 in favor of better US-EU market conditions? Well, the question is a little bit similar to your reply actually already before. But if you want to add something, please feel free to do so.
Well, here I agree with Vladimir's assessment. I doubt that it will be possible to stop Nord Stream. It is finished 95%. And it would be foolish for everyone to leave this unfinished pipeline in the sea. It will be finished, and it has been blown up so much in public opinion as if this is the main international problem. It's not, and if it is there, and if gas is shipped via Nord Stream 2 to Europe, I think a lot of emotions will calm down, and we have a lot to do in transatlantic relationship. On the climate front, we have this a climate change issue. We could embark with the United States on renewable energies, as I've mentioned before, on hydrogen. So my hope is that we will overcome this issue soon, and here I believe that Vladimir was right. It will not be stopped, and the German parliament to 80–85% is in favor of finishing that project, and it's only the Green Party who is against it. So from German side, we stick to this project, and therefore I think it will be finished.
Thanks so much. Last question in the chat. Nord Stream 2 has a certain bilateral character, even if multinational firms are included or companies are included. Can you understand the anger which this project created in the Baltics and in Central Europe? Aren't bilateral projects in energy or military a leftover from the 20th century?
Well, I said at the beginning, Germany and Russia should be doing everything to understand these fears. They are legitimate given the past. Germany and Russia time and again divided Poland. It was a punching ball between the superpowers in the East and in the West. And the same is true with the Baltic countries. And I time and again said, well, also the Kremlin, also since the fall of the wall, did not do enough to enhance its relationship to Central and Eastern European countries, did not take them serious enough, which I think is very deplorable. So again, we have to do our utmost to well, help these countries to overcome the fears, and this by guarantees. And those guarantees is the Baltic pipeline from Norway to Poland, is the system of interconnectors, is LNG. So I think we already did a lot to meet their fears and do something against it. And we should continue to do so. And I hope here that the Russian government, which is so strong, which has such a history with those countries, which has not been very positive for long periods, understands these fears also and tries to tackle them and well, open the hand to these countries.
Thank you, Professor Pflüger. Do you have another few minutes, because another interesting question has arrived? If you have another 4 or 5 minutes,
exactly,
I would ask it to you. Yeah, is Nord Stream necessary from your point of view to implement the hydrogen strategy of Germany? You already alluded to it before. It was mentioned by the chairman of Ostausschuss that it is possible to fill it up to 70% with hydrogen. And if Nord Stream will be stopped, it would ruin the green agenda of Germany. Very hard words, I would say.
Yeah, I think that goes a little bit too far. Well, while from my information, it is true that Nord Stream can also ship hydrogen. And I also heard this amount, 70–75%. And that definitely would be good. But I would not say that our hydrogen and our green agenda is dependent on that. That goes too far. There are other possibilities of producing hydrogen by electrolysis, and that is coming from renewable energies. And we already built, as Germany, hydrogen partnerships with countries like Morocco or the Gulf countries, shipping hydrogen to Germany at a certain and to Europe at a certain moment. So Nord Stream plays a role here, can play a role here, an important role, but we are not, and we will not be, we will never be dependent on Nord Stream. We're not now, and we will not be in the future. We are too diversified for that, and that's good news. That's good.
Thank you very much for this positive conclusion. I would say we covered many topics, but on the other hand, the questions showed that you actually addressed the most important issues from a German point of view already in your remarks in the beginning. So I think the discussion is rounded up very well now. We got into detail regarding some aspects, some particular questions. I would like to thank you very much, Professor Pflüger, for your time, for sharing your thoughts with us as such an experienced expert and businessman and politician. You have so many hats on your head that I can hardly name them all. Thank you very much for sharing your expertise with us, your thoughts and your openness also, your open words. How you see the situation. I think this is a very good thing that can also serve as a basis for connecting both of our countries.
Thank you. Thank you to the Seidel Stiftung and the Deutsch-Russisches Forum. And thank you to you, the participants, for your questions and for listening. And I think it's a great thing, this German-Russian forum, so that we do not only have our Atlantic ties, we want to keep them, but we also want to understand Russia. And here, I think with the help of Seidel Stiftung and Deutsch-Russisches Forum, we do some steps forward. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much for your friendly words. I also believe so. We should continue that. Unfortunately, Vladimir Milov left us a few minutes ago. He stayed for most of the discussion. I think it was interesting for him as well. But I'm very, very glad we had both of you, both expert, one perspective from Germany, the other one from Russia. And I think we really covered this controversial topic quite well. I hope our young leaders think the same way. Once again, thanks, Professor Pflüger. Thanks to all of you. See you next time. Hope to see you again. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
And thank you very much from us. We'll go back to German now for the rest of the program. Vielen Dank, Herr Professor Pflüger. Vielen Dank, Herr Dresel. Wir im Studio haben das auch sehr aufmerksam und interessiert verfolgt und haben versucht, die Fragen zu sammeln und weiterzuleiten. Wie geht es jetzt weiter? Es wird zunächst noch einen kleinen Film zu sehen geben über das Deutsch-Russische Forum. Und danach, das haben wir im Chat geschrieben, gibt es für die Teilnehmer des Young Leader Seminars einen anderen Link. Wieder ein Link zu einem Zoom-Meeting, wo wir interaktiver miteinander arbeiten können. Und um 11:20 Uhr zentraleuropäische Zeit, also in etwa 25 Minuten, gibt es eine aufgezeichnete Kochshow von Olga Matwei.
Genau, aber eigentlich ist es auch die Möglichkeit, Kochshow anzuschauen, aber auch sich ein bisschen zu entspannen, ne? Weil es ist eine gut verdiente Pause, die wir jetzt nach sehr intensiven Gesprächen und vielen kritischen Fragen, glaube ich, alle ein bisschen brauchen würden, ne? Und wir treffen uns um 11:50 Uhr zum Warming-up, um zu Hallo sagen, um sich kennenlernen und starten mit all den Gedanken von heute vormittags und mit den auch mit den Ideen und Überlegungen von gestern, weil es auch viele Themen angesprochen wurden, starten wir in einen kleinen Workshop. Keine Angst, es wird anfangen mit leichteren Sachen und dann starten wir in ein bisschen schwierige Materien, aber ich hoffe sehr, dass ihr, wie wir, auch das genießen werdet. Genau, nochmal zur Erinnerung, jetzt schauen wir den Film, genau, so einen kurzen Film über DRF. Danach gehen wir in die Pause mit der Möglichkeit, Kochshow anzuschauen und dabei vielleicht was Kleines zu essen und zu trinken.
Kochshow schon hinter dem neuen Link.
Genau, hinter dem neuen Link. Dann bitte einen neuen Link auch nutzen, damit wir dann wirklich produktiv arbeiten können. Also wir sehen uns nach dem Film um 11:50 Uhr. Ja.
Und eine kleine Hausaufgabe für später. Habt bitte ein Blatt Papier bereit.
Kann klein sein.
Kann groß sein,
kann groß sein
und
vielleicht auch Kugelschreiber, falls uns was noch dazu einfällt.
Genau. Так что еще раз встречаемся по новой ссылке после того, как будет клип, после того, как закончится этот вебинар. Новая ссылка, новый Zoom. И там сначала вы можете посмотреть это кулинарное шоу, а мы с вами на воркшопе начинаем разговаривать друг с другом без 10:11 по центральноевропейскому времени. Вы должны сами посчитать, сколько это получится у вас.
Да, первое задание уже пошло. Посчитайте, через сколько мы встречаемся. Да.
Alles klar.
Ein Gedanke auch noch von mir, wenn ich noch darf, liebe Moderatoren. Es hat mir sehr viel Spaß gemacht, gestern Abend schon und heute. Ich werde mich jetzt ausklinken. Der Workshop ist nur für Sie. Da darf auch ich nicht dran teilnehmen, obwohl wir Kooperationspartner sind. Insofern nutzen Sie die Chance, genießen Sie es. Und ich hoffe, ich bleibe mit dem einen oder anderen von Ihnen in Kontakt. Und vielleicht sehen wir uns ja heute Nachmittag oder morgen nochmal, wenn es wieder allgemeines Programm gibt.
Danke, Herr Dresel, für das sonnigste Bild des Seminars und wir wünschen Ihnen auch einen schönen Tag noch.
Ja.
Danke. Tschüss.
Tschüss.
Dank dem Praktikum habe ich keine Angst mehr, per Telefon zu sprechen, ja, wegen meiner Akzent und wegen der Aussprache. Und jetzt glaube ich, das war super und ich bin wirklich dankbar dem Deutsch-Russischen Forum.
Gerade mit Hilfe des Deutsch-Russischen Forums und auch gerade spielend Russisch lernen, stelle ich fest, dass wir immer mehr junge Leute für Russisch begeistern können.
Wir hatten damals 3 Sprachen zur Auswahl, also Französisch, Russisch und Latein. Und Russisch fand ich einfach am interessantesten. Es ist ja das größte Land, das es überhaupt gibt. Und deswegen ist es spannend, darüber was zu wissen.
Sowas ist ja nur möglich mit dem inneren Engagement der Leute, die diese Dinge in der täglichen Arbeit machen. Und da möchte ich mal Dankeschön sagen.
Ich wünsche Ihnen, dass es weiter wächst und gedeiht und dass wir in Zukunft noch mehr Jugendliche begeistern können.
Junge Menschen, die noch nicht versaut sind, die auch diejenigen sind, die in Zukunft die Politik gestalten, die das Leben gestalten, die nicht so verkniffen sind, die in Kontakt zu bringen. Das ist die beste Friedenspolitik, die man überhaupt nur machen kann.
В рамках таких конференций мы часто бываем в каких-то таких местах, в которые ты не попадаешь в обычной жизни. Это то, что называется выглянуть за рамки своего обычного дня, да, и я никогда не была на такой электростанции, это потрясающе.
Gerade auch diese Generation, die sich jetzt in den letzten Jahren, Jahrzehnten herausgebildet hat und die ja wiederum auch die Zukunft der deutsch-russischen Beziehung weiter pflegen und erweitern sollte, dass man da auch vielleicht mal guckt, dass eben auch das Forum in diesen Generationswechsel eben auch mit nachvollzieht.
Wir haben über viele Themen fürchterliche Diskussionen ausgetragen, aber sie wurden eben ausgetragen.
Solche Dialoge, vor allem zwischen den jungen, engagierten Leuten, Nachwuchskräften, die sind so eine Grundlage, damit auch schwierige Zeiten nicht zu einer Sprachlosigkeit führen.
Das Deutsch-Russische Forum muss fest dazu stehen. Kein Europa gegen Russland, nur zusammen mit Russland, auch wenn es sehr schwer ist.
Russland ist eben tatsächlich nicht nur mit dem Verstand zu verstehen, sondern es gibt auch eine emotionale Basis, die die deutsch-russischen Beziehungen tragen.
Das Glück, was ich selber erfahren konnte, 60 Jahre in Frieden zu leben, dass Ihnen, dass der nächsten und der übernächsten Generation vielleicht auch positiv widerfährt.
Guten Tag. Mein Name ist Tatjana Bratkina und ich werde wahrscheinlich etwas sagen, das Sie enttäuschen wird. Ich bin keine professionelle Fotografin. Ich habe nicht Fotografie im klassischen Sinne studiert. Tatsächlich wollten meine Eltern nie, dass ich einen kreativen Beruf ausübe. Sie wollten, dass ich etwas Anständiges lerne. Und ich habe Wirtschaft studiert. Das ernährt mich nicht nur, sondern gibt mir auch die Möglichkeit, schöne und kreative Dinge zu tun. Außerdem hatte mein Vater einen Freund, einen Fotografen. Er war ziemlich gut und seine Arbeiten wurden in Zeitschriften veröffentlicht. Er machte großartige Fotos, die mich meine ganze Kindheit begleitet haben. Ich habe immer noch Alben aus meiner Kindheit davon. Es hat ihn gefreut, dass ich mich für Fotografie interessiere, aber meine Eltern waren dagegen und sagten, nein, komm schon, wenn du einen Freund ruinieren willst, kauf ihn eine Kamera. Ich war richtig glücklich, als ich mir endlich eine gute Kamera kaufen konnte und ich habe mich mit Porträtfotos versucht. Ich habe verstanden, dass mir das Wissen dafür fehlt, also habe ich mir eine gute Fotoschule gesucht. In dieser Hinsicht hatte ich Glück und dort habe ich alles gelernt. Beleuchtung richtig einstellen, Fotos bearbeiten, Porträts aufnehmen und ich habe absolut jeden, den ich kannte, fotografiert. Und dann begannen die Leute plötzlich zu sagen, hör mal, du bist gut, du hast einen guten Blick, siehst das Besondere. Ich war erstaunt, weil ich mich selbst so nicht gesehen habe. Und um ehrlich zu sein, geht mir das noch bis heute so. Ich schaue mir oft all diese schönen Fotogalerien oder meine eigenen Fotos an und denke, das sind nicht meine Bilder. Die Fotos hat jemand anderes gemacht. Außerdem habe ich ja auch Vergleichsmöglichkeiten. Ich habe Fotografie studiert und wurde dabei von großen und renommierten Fotografen inspiriert. Übrigens interessant, dass sie alle deutscher Herkunft waren. Da sind zunächst einmal Helmut Newton, dann Ellen von Unwerth und Peter Lindbergh. Sie machten alle kontraststarke Schwarz-Weiß-Bilder. Ich fand das beeindruckend, denn meine gesamte Kindheit war durch diese Welt der Schwarz-Weiß-Ästhetik geprägt. Wir hatten zu Hause lange Zeit keinen Farbfernseher und alles, was wir im Fernsehen sahen, war schwarz-weiß und ich dachte, das ist normal, so muss es sein. Ich liebe Schwarz-Weiß-Filme wirklich, nicht nur Film noir oder klassische Filme. Ich liebe das goldene Hollywood und ich mag die europäischen Klassiker, auch in Schwarz-Weiß. Wenn ich Filme ansehe, nicht nur Filme noir, Filme wie Casablanca oder Bergmanns Siebentes Siegel, kann ich nur sagen, Gott, was für ein hervorragendes Licht. Wie machen die das bloß? Und natürlich schaue ich mir etwas ab, lerne, zum Beispiel bei Sujets. Ich habe immer geträumt, eigene Filme zu machen. Ich habe viele gute Bekannte im Theatermilieu. Eine Menge toller, junger, talentierter Menschen, die sich noch nicht ausgetobt haben, könnte man sagen. Sie freuen sich über Aufmerksamkeit, sie freuen sich, bei spannenden Projekten mitzumachen, die ein bisschen frech sind und auch ein bisschen, ja, erotisch vielleicht. Wir haben eine Menge Gangster-Noir-Renaissance-Projekte gemacht. Vor kurzem wurde hier sogar ein Fight Club abgedreht. Die Budgets sind weiß Gott klein, deswegen läuft alles natürlich mit der Hilfe von Freunden. Manchmal auf der Suche nach Outfits oder nach Visagisten, die sich bereit erklären, zu sehr günstigen Bedingungen an dem Projekt teilzunehmen, oder nach Locations. Gott sei Dank ist Petersburg ein fotografisches Mekka. Die Stadt selbst ist einfach die erstaunlichste Location, die man finden kann, mit all den Höfen, Häusern und Kanälen und Straßen. Mein erstes großes Projekt in der Fotografie, das zwei meiner großen Lieben vereint hat, die Liebe zu St. Petersburg und die zur Fotografie, war das Projekt, einen Architekturatlas von St. Petersburg zu erstellen. Dieses Projekt ist aus meiner Teilnahme am Clubforum des Deutsch-Russischen Forums hervorgegangen. Da es die Firma Knauf finanziert hat, kam der Text von dem deutschen Architekten Peter Knoch. Der Herausgeber war Dirk Besserer. Ich hatte großes Glück. Es war schönstes Sommerwetter, fast kein Regen, was in Petersburg sehr selten ist. Und ich bin sehr methodisch vorgegangen, habe die Stadt in Quadrante unterteilt, alle Motive markiert und bin mindestens zweimal in jeden Quadrant gefahren, um die Motive morgens zu fotografieren, bei Morgenlicht, ohne Autos, ohne Menschen, um 5 Uhr morgens, 6 Uhr morgens. Und dann bei Abendlicht, denn das Licht ist anders und die Effekte sind anders. Vielleicht fragen Sie sich, warum ich das tue. Ich weiß nicht, ob Ihnen das bekannt ist, aber viele berühmte Fotografen haben ein sehr langes und sehr intensives, kreatives Leben hinter sich und haben bis zu ihrem Lebensende schöne, brillante Dinge fotografiert. Das ist doch mein Traum.